Hey everyone, I'm Madonna. This is David, and we're going to have a fun conversation today about pain.
Oh, that's a fun conversation for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's waiting to dip into some of that.
Oh, look, everyone has a bit of emotional pain, spiritual pain, biochemical pain, structural pain occasionally.
Hmm.
Oh, actually, do you know anyone who's never been in pain?
Oh, no. How would that happen?
Yeah, how would that happen?
You go through childhood, it's inevitable.
Well, I've got a lot of people who actually, like one of my besties, she actually had a really, her and her sister, they have two totally different experiences from their childhood.
Mm.
So her sister was like, "Oh, this happened and that happened and this happened. My mum did this, my dad did this, and they've got that." And then my friend's like, "Life was pretty bloody good.
Mm.
Really didn't have any issues."
Hmm.
But some people, I think, have more resilience from day one, and I don't know what gives kids that resilience that allows them to skate through childhood pretty well.
Well, it has to do with the family setting, but that's two people out of one household
Mm,
with a different story.
yeah.
Well, that's not uncommon.
Yeah, we saw a joke before, which it was just a joke, 40 years ago, fathers had four kids. Today, kids have four fathers.
Wow.
But the whole parental breakup and single parents, like it's all challenging.
85% of people who divorce get married again. And
Yeah,
and
right.
they've got a lower success rate.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Just saying, that's the statistics.
And is there statistics about how many of those kids are abused by the step parents?
The statistics are more like you'll find it in Australian government studies that if there's a step parent in the house, self-harm, especially with girls, is 4 times as likely.
Self-harm.
Self-harm. All types of self-harm. It's really amazing when you look at the studies.
So I was a bit of a turd of a teenager. So are you talking as a way of getting attention?
It didn't say that.
Right?
It didn't say that, so attempted suicide, all types of self-harm were 4 times as likely with a step parent in the home.
Hmm.
And most custodians are 90% of custodians are mums. So it must be the guy in the house that the girls don't know. Probably be scared.
Interesting.
And everyone makes claims that it's also peaceful, but the statistics show that it's not.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, well, yeah. Well, there's a lot of pain in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we were talking before we came on a little bit, and from a kinesiology perspective, there's this thing called a kinesiology triad. So, and there's three sides to it, and obviously there's a million sides to everything. But
Mm.
one side's chemical, one side's mental or emotional, and the other side's structural. So, from that mental perspective, and as we've discussed many times, that ACEs score, the adverse childhood event score, the higher the ACE score, the more likely people are to end up with all cause
Hmm.
mortality. And I suppose structural pain is one of those
Well,
things.
that's in childhood, but it's also in adulthood.
Yeah.
Like stress in adulthood, like when you look at the precursors for things like heart attack, cancer, stress is the number one issue.
Yeah, right.
Chronic stress. And so it's for nearly all chronic disease, stress is one of the main things that causes it to get worse. And obviously, if you're growing up in a family that's not managing their problems properly and
Yep.
going and sorting them out, that stress converts into physical ailments as you get older. And
Yeah.
that's been proven. So a lot of people who are taking drugs,
So that's the adult
childhood,
childhood event score.
right. Well, it is really, isn't it?
It's sort of like it just manifests continually, the sort of thing where, people talk about marrying their father or marrying their mother, or, it's sort of like it's the devil sort of thing where you marry or as they talk about in Sleepless in Seattle, it's one neurosi marrying another neurosi that
Right.
feels quite safe and comfortable together.
But then, like you were saying earlier, people in different families. So some people in families will be extremely traumatized from what happened in their childhood, and other
Right.
siblings, they'll be fine. And they'll say that the sibling who's really suffering, there's something wrong with them,
Right.
right? Because it depends on the resilience of the individuals.
Yes, absolutely.
And so yeah, so different people are affected differently.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned to you that there was a 100-year study in the States where every 10 years with the, what's that thing the government does every 7 years here in Australia?
Census.
Census. So every 10 years in the States with the census, there was a whole bunch of questions asked. And what they found is that from 100 years ago, this was released like 15 years ago or something, every 10 years, people's resilience seems to have gone down 10%.
Mm.
But then when they were looking at potential causes of it, so there's less stability in the home, like you can imagine 50 years ago compared to now, or even say 70 or 80 years ago compared to now, small towns, you knew the people, you'd sort of almost be able to guess who you were going to marry. It was all fairly insular and safe and the community. And now, like, I've got a new neighbor, 3 months, I haven't met him yet.
Mm. Well, the studies are showing that general community empathy is decreasing.
Right.
Right, for more power and control actually is what's taking over it. And power and control is the problem in relationships. It's the problem with social movements, and they're not. And so really, because a lot of movements like I don't want to step on any toes, but just say things like feminism, for example.
Yeah.
It's about getting power for one side.
Yeah.
And one of the main problems we have at the moment is men's health.
Yes.
And feminism, and now men almost like they've got the higher suicide rates, old men and middle age especially.
Yeah.
And those people are suffering.
And is it particularly white men or black men or
Well, I don't really know. In the
Asian
studies, it
or
just
Indian
talks
or
men's health issues have
right?
been
Okay.
increasing for 20 years and not being dealt with because of the way, I think the way relationships are managed in marriages and that type of thing.
Yeah.
It's like men don't seem to have any power because once you're married, it's all can be made all about the kids.
Right.
And the adult issues get preferred over the real kids issues because, you know, how many stories do you hear? I know some people who are divorcing at the moment, the kids going to school and the kids just like crazy at school. And they
Yeah.
weren't before. And, it's a tragic thing.
It's a lot for a little brain to,
Right.
even though they think it's okay and even though it's normalized and even though it will be out there, it's still a lot for a little brain to process.
Yeah, and that's an A score. So if your parents separated, divorced, that's an A score.
Yeah.
So, that's one thing.
Yeah. I mean, the positive is 2 homes. And parents always trying to love you more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think people could work harder on their relationships.
Yeah.
But
Well, sometime, like I was chatting to my chiropractor the other day about how I really didn't do anything to, tear my, I've got a torn hamstring.
mm-hmm.
And there was no physical thing. It wasn't playing soccer. It wasn't going out for a run. It was nothing. And I think I've found the emotional trigger, which I mentioned.
Because you don't normally get pain, right? So you're in pain recently, and it was like acute.
No. I've had pain since I was 10 years old.
Oh.
I just get fairly chronic low-level stuff. Pain during sleep is fairly standard.
Mm-hmm.
Pain when I walk first thing in the morning, fairly standard. Hip pain on and off over like 15 years, fairly standard.
Right.
Comes and goes. My neck hardly ever moves to where my chiropractor would like it to. Mm-hmm. Fairly standard. Mm-hmm. But I've got plenty of energy.
You driving when you're trying to look around.
Yeah. Yeah, you go like this.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a client years ago, and she was this
That's
long.
why we need swivel chairs in cars. That's the innovation no one's found.
Homer probably put one of those in his bubble car that he created in an episode. Anyway, so but I think the difference with me is that I've got good energy. So therefore, I take crap loads of supplements for my pain.
Right.
So I take lots of inflavonoid intensive care and stem enhance and redox molecules and, so I do a lot for my pain. If I need to, I sit down on the lounge and get 5 minutes off my back. Right. If I need to, I'm running the AO hub, and chronic pain is always one of the ones I choose. So I do a lot for my pain.
Right. I suppose I've had surgery a few times, so I've had to rely on some stronger drugs for it.
Yeah.
Because when you're like got a big cut and you still have to be a parent, it hurts like hell.
Yeah, and you mentioned before we started that people don't have a lot of empathy for pain.
sometimes a difficulty with being in pain is that everyone gets sick of it.
Yeah.
And they kind of get sick of you as well.
Yeah, there's a
And I
term
don't,
for that, isn't there? It's sort of like
yeah,
a carer's fatigue.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's not uncommon. Nobody loves you when you're down and out,
Mm.
and it's a funny thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And because well, what do you think? You see more people than me in pain?
Well, once I actually grabbed a couple of hundred of my files because I was doing some coaching, for $1 million a year. Only joking, wasn't that much. It was expensive. Anyway, and they said, well, you've got to work out what the number one thing people come in to see you for is.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered going through a whole bunch, and I had at that stage, because this is about 15 years ago, so I'd had people who I'd been seeing for 5, 10, 15 years by that stage. And I'd get them out and I'd go, oh, this person, and I'd open it up and find the first page, and I'd go, really? They came to me for pain. And I'd put it aside. No, and it was about 80% of people, pain was the trigger that brought them in through the
Right.
door.
And you weren't self-aware of that.
No, not at all, because by that stage I had this long-term relationship with my clients, and I just, some of them I knew as a migraine guy or a, menopausal woman, or and then other stuff would come out the longer you work with someone. But yeah, but it was interesting that pain was the number one thing I
pain's
was
like an
taught.
alarm in
Don't
your
forget
body.
your coffee too.
I think so.
Oh, you finished.
Pain's like an alarm in the body.
It is.
And it tells you that there's something needs attention.
Yes. Well, what my chiro commented about my butt pain, my hamstring pain, was that it was the straw that broke the camel's back. So, I'd had like a bit of a bruised pain in there on my sit bones for months and months and months.
Right.
And then the emotional stuff that I got that Saturday afternoon, that was enough, and that was the straw. You go, that's just silly. And I was in our little video with Elise this morning, and I was sort of thinking about that from that chemical, mental, structural triad in kinesiology. How we talk about in kinesiology how energetically our body can be in fight and flight.
Right.
So you can be lying on the table, and as a kinesiologist, I can work out which muscles are working and which ones aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go, oh, your body's in fight. Ah, your body's in freeze. Ah, your body's in flight. And those muscles are already activating.
Mm.
So you think about the butt muscles, you can be standing your ground. You can be one leg out the door, with flight, or you can be, so basically the fight and flight and freeze, energetically, the muscles are already doing it.
Mm.
So I find that with kinesia all the time. I just hadn't thought of it with my own body. Right. As you do.
Well, it's interesting how the body keeps the score, because those things will be emotional and psychologically triggered.
Yes.
And, so, because there's also, back to the social equation we were talking about before, part of that is, I think that I find it really disturbing when I see other people in pain.
Right.
And
you didn't cope with my butt being sore last week.
No, right. Well, it's just because I get really quite like when I see somebody hurting somebody else, I get really upset, almost more than if I'm hurt myself.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like for example, something like especially the thing with kids. Do you know what I mean? And the adult's decision is becoming more important all the time, and then those kids are suffering. Oh, that's really sad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like when I get, because I'm a bit of an empath. So when I see that happening, I get really like, how come? Why would you do that? And usually most people cause suffering when they're trying to get something.
Yes.
And they just like block everything else out, and right then people are, because I think emotional, psychological, those things are hard to get out, and they store in the body. And like the ACE scores say, they transfer into the body as physical pain later.
Yeah.
And it's a strange thing. So by the time you get physical pain, there's already been something going on for a long time underneath.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that naturopathic rule of thumb is for every year you've had a problem, you need at least a month plus 3 months of treatment.
Right.
To unravel it.
Like a half-life thing.
But you have to also add in the amount of time it took to get to that problem. So like with my butt, it's not just about my butt muscles, like what was building up before then, to make that. You know, the lack of yoga, the lack of Pilates, the
Right.
lack of stretching. Yeah. Sitting on those stupid chairs at Mini Muscles for 3 years.
Right.
Mm.
Well, we all do it and we all get pain. And I don't know, for me, I think pain's an emergency and I'm always like, whatever people need to do, they need to do.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of options for dealing with it.
Yep.
And whether you take drugs or herbs or anything to get rid of it, good. Because, because you've got the short-term effects, which
Yes.
you might have something cheap from the supermarket, but then long-term effects, like you say, these things have been building for a long time.
Yeah.
And getting in behind what's going on can be really helpful
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah. So obviously from a holistic counseling perspective, that helps to get in underneath it. So with like, are you thinking antidepressants, anti-anxiety, antipsychotics, those sort of things when
Oh
you
no,
mention
well, with
medications?
with physical pain, like I've taken in the past codeine or paracetamol. I don't normally take anything much stronger than that, but
Yeah.
I take them if I need to.
Yeah.
Sure, good to have them in the cupboard if you get a toothache.
Yeah, I didn't have any in the house last week.
Yeah, I know.
So that's funny. Yeah. And when Jay got home, he said, "Oh, I think I've got one in the knapsack we take camping, because if
Right.
you're out camping, you don't want to be in pain and
Mm,
not have anything you can do about it, since I don't take my truckload of supplements with me generally camping."
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to have things on board for emergencies.
Yeah. And I was thinking, one of the thing, and, not that anyone ever does this, but when I run my little kinesiology things on my YouTube channel, and I teach people how to run the brain buttons and stuff, all of that helps to get that corpus callosum connected faster.
Mm,
So when we have a stress or a trauma, and then we're not talking to someone for like a day, a month, a year, 20 years, the corpus callosum isn't connected in relation to that person.
right, that's the left-right-hand side
Yeah,
connection
so the
corpus.
connection, the corpus callosum is, and funnily enough, the corpus callosum showed up as one of the areas last week when I had my butt pain,
Right.
which sort of gave me a bit of a hint there was some emotional gear in there.
Well, you took some painkillers. Did they work?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I took two of two on one day and one on another day and two on the weekend. So I think I've had 5.
Hmm.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, in an emergency, they're good.
Mm. Yeah. Then it was really funny because, with Teddy this morning, I drove him to school and he's, of course, all excited that we're not walking. I'm just not sure when, to start pushing my leg. Like, when do you know it's
Right.
healed?
Hmm.
Anyway, I don't know. When do you know it's healed? I do know that I'm pretty strong, from I'm I'm stubborn. So I did a old, heel to heel ankle injury going back about, oh God, how old am I? Many, many, many years ago, 30 plus years ago when I was living up in Cooktown, playing with the year 10, 11, 12 boys as one of the teachers' wives. And anyway, so me and this big tall boy, we both hit the soccer ball at the same time. I injured my foot and I, everything I read, there was no internet back then.
Mm.
So, you hear, okay, keep off your foot for 6 weeks. And honestly, I couldn't have put pressure on. But as soon as I could get going for my runs, I had a corrective hobble, which is what I
Right.
called it for about 12 months because I couldn't actually, go heel toe, heel toe. So I actually jogged on the ball of my foot for about a year
Oh, yeah.
afterwards. Mm.
Well, probably from way back then, that's probably what's causing the pain.
It probably wouldn't have helped. I probably, yes. And then about 10 years after that, I had a doctor do some scans and he found in the heel of my foot, there was like this big black bruise and there
Right.
were all these broken fragments of bone in the middle
Oh,
of this
really?
big black bruise.
Oh, that'll be it right there.
And I thought, interesting. That'll be from when I didn't heal myself. So allow yourselves to heal. But it's always a worry, isn't it? I've got a friend who's been in a moon boot for 6 months. She's never going to get out of that moon boot
Mm.
because the work keeps making her do work heavier than she really needs to quit,
Mm.
but she can't quit because she has no money. Anyway, it's all
So
awful,
many
isn't
people
it?
are locked up in the job in pain. And, anything you can do to relieve the stress will help
Yeah,
the body heal better.
yeah. Thank goodness she listens to her frequencies every day and all sorts of things. But yeah, so people can use things like homeopathy. Actually, on the Children's Health Defence website, that's Bobby Kennedy's website that he's just passed on in the last few months. They've got I think it's free, a video on homeopathy.
Right.
So they're really trying to train people about things you can do cheaper in your own home for your health. Things like Bach flower remedies, have been around for hundreds of years.
Right.
Australian bush flower essence. There's lots of flower essences that people can do for emotional gear.
Well, we used homeopathics when they were babies.
Oh, they're amazing.
Everything.
Yeah. And it's incredible how quick they work.
Mm.
People can go and learn Reiki level 1, for a couple of $100 over a weekend, and then you've got a hands-on tool. Every time you put your hands on, you're actually increasing the energy of healing to that part of the body. Kinesiology is next level up, but there's nothing wrong with Reiki. It can do amazing things as well. You've probably seen those people doing tapping techniques. Obviously I do a lot of tapping in my kinesi, but there's a lot of tapping techniques, processes that help to reset the brain and the body and the mind in relation to a specific goal or target, or you think about the big bad stepmother, for example. I love my stepmother, I love my stepmother, I love my stepmother, I love my stepmother. I don't know how the tapping works. I don't do those.
It depends on the stepmother too.
It depends on the stepmother. Yeah. So because you've been through a lot of stress and trauma, what would you recommend?
Well,
they're just a couple of natural things.
I think that there's two sides of it. One's dealing with the immediate issue,
Yeah.
which might take anything. It depends on how bad the pain is. But I don't have any ideological thing. If people are in pain, take whatever you need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because once you're in pain, you can't function.
Yeah.
And you function at a low level, which makes you unhappy.
Actually, sort of funny you say that, because I hopped in the car last Tuesday was my worst day, and I forgot how to start the car because I sat down. I couldn't sit, so therefore I had my butt up in a weird position, and it's a push button car, but I couldn't remember which one of the foot pedals you put down to start the car.
Right.
And Teddy's there and he said, "Can't you start the car, Grandma?" I said, "I'll get there," but I made sure the brake was on in case I went forward or back, because I just knew my brain wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty funny. I went, wow, that's pretty interesting. How many people are out there like that?
That's right, because once you're in, so dealing with the emergency pain first.
Yes.
But then after that, trying to find out what the underlying causes are, because it might be stress, it might be something else, it might be some long-term health thing that you don't know about.
Mm.
So, trying to find out what's underlying is the key.
Yeah.
Because there'll be something underlying. Otherwise, the ACE scores in childhood, adverse childhood experiences, they've proven that they manifest into adult chronic illness.
Yes.
So therefore, it's the sooner you deal with that kind of stuff, the better, and understand it. And so so the pain comes up now. Obviously, if you got a something that's a physical thing, that's different. But if something comes up cancer or this or that, there's a lot of things that could be causing that. Like I mentioned earlier, stress is a big factor in that. So if you can reduce the stress, you're reducing the pressure on your body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
then often when you're sick, you're sick and you're in pain, it's like you also feel like you're a burden on everybody.
Yeah.
So it's hard to reduce the stress.
Yeah. And that adds to the emotional load.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so chronic pain's a hard thing to work with.
Yeah. Awesome. Any last minute thoughts? Well,
another thing that's helpful, things like yoga and that type of thing.
Yeah, right. Movement. Yeah, physical movement. Yeah. And the yoga is great because it does have that spiritual.
And there's so many different types of things.
Yeah.
Well, the way that's come into the West, it's not so spiritual, but that's good because a lot of people don't like it because it's Indian. But the actual basic, the Western world, we've kind of extracted the physical bits out of it.
Yeah.
And made a Western version. Carl Jung said that the West would make their own version of yoga.
Yeah.
And we're doing it on a psychological level.
Yeah.
And so many studies have come in to show how helpful it is to rebuilding.
Yeah.
And getting the body back to calm.
So obviously, if you're local and you want a session with David or I, we'll have our little details down below. We can do Zoom calls. We can, do things around the world if the time isn't too painful. Mm-hmm. But anyway, hopefully that was pain. It's such a big topic. And I don't think it's going anywhere soon.
No. It's the nature of the world.
It's the nature of the world. There's a bit of a beast going on currently. Okay, everyone, have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.